This story happened to me many years ago when, at 19, I had definitively dodged the army draft. After breaking up with my girlfriend, a split punctuated by a confrontation with her brother, I decided it was best to get away from it all and moved to Moscow. My mom had arranged for me to stay in the Moscow apartment of her old college friend, a woman she had kept in touch with through letters for the past 18 years. The apartment was in a 5-story building slated for demolition. My mom's friend had already been given a new place, but the old building hadn't been fully vacated yet. The gas and electricity were still on, and she still had the keys. She also helped me get a job as a courier. I planned to spend that year in Moscow productively, hoping to get into one of the city's technical universities. Back in my hometown, my academic life had been a mess. Right after graduation, my girlfriend announced she was pregnant. We started planning a wedding, though it never happened. I never managed to apply to college that year. The pregnancy, it turned out, was a lie. And even though I forgave her, our love story had created too many problems. When the relationship finally fell apart, despite the efforts of her parents and my mom to help, I decided I needed to change my life. Tatiana Mikhailovna and her husband met me at the train station. They helped me with my bags, took me to the apartment, and handed me the keys. And just like that, I became a resident of a small 2-bedroom apartment in a Moscow neighborhood. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old 5-story building. There were 15 apartments in our section, but only 4 were still occupied. Not far from the block of condemned buildings, a luxury residential complex was under construction. The developer, it seemed, hadn't gotten around to demolishing the old houses yet and planned to house migrant workers in the empty apartments until all the residents had moved out. We were told we had anywhere from a few months to a year. They had furnished the apartment for me with a bed, an old TV, a refrigerator, and a wardrobe. There was a stove and a set of dishes. In the hallway, a massive, solid wood sideboard from an old furniture set remained. The phone line worked, and I had internet, though the connection was already becoming unreliable. Tatiana Mikhailovna gave me her cell phone number, told me to take a week to settle in, and invited me to her husband's office. I should say, I had never met Tatiana Mikhailovna or her husband before, though I'd heard about them from my mother for years. Our first meeting left me in a state of euphoria. They seemed to know a lot about me and had prepared thoroughly for my arrival. I had no neighbors on my floor, nor on the 4th and 5th floors. On the 1st floor, an old woman lived in one apartment with her deaf-mute son, and an old alcoholic lived in the other. The 2nd floor was occupied by a young family with a child and a single woman in her 60s. Tatiana Mikhailovna explained that the ones who had already moved were those who were satisfied with the new housing offers or who had managed to negotiate for better apartments. The neighboring building entrances were just as sparsely populated. In my first week, I saw maybe 5 people in the whole building. I didn't go out much, just to the grocery store and once to submit my application for evening courses at the university I'd chosen. Tatiana Mikhailovna's husband had provided me with a letter confirming my employment with his partner's company for the application. Life promised to be interesting and full. The office where Uncle Vidya, as Tatiana Mikhailovna's husband asked me to call him, worked was a lively place. There were lots of young men and women, and the work itself didn't seem too demanding. Uncle Vidya was a jovial man, clearly popular with women. He made money easily and seemed eager to share his zest for life with me, perhaps because he and his wife had never been able to have children of their own. I had been living in the apartment for almost a week without any incidents when, the day before I was supposed to start work, I was suddenly woken by a strange noise. Something had fallen in the apartment upstairs. It fell, and that was that. It could have been anything. But after waking up, I found myself listening intently. Suddenly, I thought I could make out footsteps, right above me, in an apartment that, according to Tatiana Mikhailovna, had been empty and locked up for a long time. Someone was walking from the large room to the kitchen, stopping, and then walking back. I didn't hear any more footsteps and eventually fell asleep about 20 minutes later, unable to come up with any logical explanation for the strange sounds. The next few days were a blur. I was learning the ropes at my new job, getting to know the people at Uncle Vidya's firm, and starting my courses. On the very first evening at the university, while wandering the corridors looking for my classroom, I met a girl named Elisa. She was 17. When I ran into her a second time a week later, again in a hallway, I figured it was my chance and asked for her number. That evening, I was heading home later than usual, walking from the metro station and thinking about her. I passed a haggard-looking beggar woman in filthy clothes and, on autopilot, dropped all the loose change from my pocket into her outstretched hand. "God bless you," she mumbled as I walked away, but I didn't even turn around. My thoughts were completely consumed by Elisa. She was beautiful, with blue eyes, a slender figure in tight jeans, and a black turtleneck that hinted at a generous bust. My mind kept returning to the color and expression of her eyes. They had struck me during our very first encounter. There was something unusual about them. Despite the smiles we had exchanged, her eyes held a deep, hidden sadness. When we bumped into each other again in the hallway, just as unexpectedly as the first time, we both jumped and then burst out laughing. I decided then and there that I had to start a relationship with this girl. I wanted to get to know her better, to date her. Why not? I even had a place to bring her if things got serious. With these thoughts, I approached my building. It was already dark, and the streetlights in our neighborhood were terrible. The roads were torn up from construction traffic. As I got closer, I looked up at my window. The light was off, of course, just as it was for the entire 4th and 5th floors. Only one apartment on the 2nd floor had a light on. And then, for a split second, I thought I saw a shadow move in the window above mine. What shadow? I thought. It's pitch black, the lights are off. I must have imagined it. I entered the dimly lit podest. Above the 2nd floor, it was absolute darkness. I walked up to my apartment in the pitch black, fumbled for the key, found the lock on the 3rd try, opened the door, and went inside. I shivered. It felt chilly inside. I flipped the light switch, took off my coat, and touched the radiator. It was cold. There was no hot water either. I boiled the kettle, mixed the hot water with cold to wash up, and ate some cold cutlets that the ever-caring Tatiana Mikhailovna had brought over. From day one, despite my protests, she had insisted on feeding me, sometimes showing up unannounced. An hour later, I started to feel sick, a familiar feeling recently. I tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. With a heavy head, I got up, then lay back down. Damn those cutlets. I had to start refusing Tatiana Mikhailovna's help. I could manage on my own. Suddenly, the noise started again from the apartment upstairs. I looked at my clock. Crap, it was 1 in the morning. Something fell again, and again I heard footsteps. A shiver ran down my spine, whether from the cold or fear, I couldn't tell. There was definitely someone up there. I could clearly hear heavy footsteps. The fear jolted me out of bed. I sat up, clutching my blanket. The footsteps stopped. Someone was standing on the 4th floor, right above me, in a vacant, locked apartment. I sat like that for another 10 minutes, listening to the silence, trying to figure out if I was actually scared. I was. The need for sleep finally started to take over. I lay back down and closed my eyes. Just then, I heard a scraping sound at my front door. I should mention that in these old Khrushchev-era buildings, especially the empty ones, sound travels incredibly well. I shot up in bed again, tiptoed to the door, still wrapped in my blanket, and pressed my ear against it. There was no peephole. It was dead silent. And then, just as I was about to pull away, I thought I heard someone breathing on the other side. Goosebumps erupted all over my body, and the hair on my arms stood on end. I froze in front of the door, on my tiptoes, wrapped in a blanket, with what must have been a crazed look on my face, which I glimpsed in the hallway mirror reflecting the moonlight from the kitchen. Slowly, trying not to make a sound, I backed away from the door and scrambled into bed, grabbing my cell phone from the nightstand on the way. Looking at the screen, I saw I had a text from Elisa, sent about an hour and a half ago. "Sasha, sorry it's so late. I'm really sad and lonely. I'm in big trouble. Could we meet tonight?" I decided to wait until morning to contact her. When I woke up, I called Uncle Vidya and told him I had food poisoning. He sighed but gave me a couple of days to recover. Right after I hung up with him, Tatiana Mikhailovna called. "Sasha, honey, are you okay?" "Yes, Tatiana Mikhailovna. Hey, do you know who used to live in the apartment above me?" "My friend lived there with her daughter," Tatiana Mikhailovna said, her voice tinged with sadness. "Unfortunately, her husband passed away, and she started drinking heavily. She went downhill in just a couple of years. We, as neighbors, helped her and her daughter with money and food. The daughter had just started college, her whole life ahead of her. She couldn't handle what happened to her father and mother. She killed herself. They only found her because of the smell. It was the middle of a heat wave, and the neighbors couldn't stand it anymore. The police came, broke down the door, and found the girl in the bathtub. She had slit her wrists. The poor thing was already starting to decompose. That was a year ago. Vidya and I were on vacation in Antalya. Her mom disappeared somewhere. The neighbors told us all this. They found the mother a month after they found the girl. They said she died of alcohol poisoning. The whole community chipped in for the cremations, first for the daughter, then for the mother. They had no other relatives. No one has lived in that apartment since. I hung up the phone and thought for a moment. Then I got dressed, locked my apartment, and went up to the 4th floor. It was 11 in the morning. I went to the apartment above mine and jiggled the door handle. It was locked. It was a standard door, covered in faux leather, with 2 locks. I tried the handles of the other apartments, they were all locked. Back on my floor, I carefully inspected my own door. There were no marks on it, except, what was that? Down at the very bottom, I noticed a few small brown spots. Dried blood? Yes, it looked like blood. I went down to the apartment where the young family lived and rang the bell. "Who is it?" A sleepy female voice called out. "Hi, please open up. I'm your neighbor's nephew, from the apartment above you." The door opened. A disheveled young woman stood on the threshold. From inside the apartment, a child started to cry. "Hello again, and sorry to bother you. Did you hear anything strange last night?" I asked. "No, why?" The young woman looked at me with surprised eyes. "There's nobody here. Besides, we're moving out the day after tomorrow. Some construction workers came by. It looks like they're getting ready to move in." "Okay, thank you." The door closed, and I rang the bell of the neighboring apartment, where the elderly woman lived. When she opened the door, I was struck by how unwell she looked. It was hard to tell if she was 60 or 70. She had short gray hair and a withered face, her mouth a thin slit. I introduced myself and asked the same question. "You're Vidya's nephew, aren't you?" "Well, not exactly his nephew," I stammered. "Tatiana Mikhailovna is my mom's friend. It's a long story." "Just come in," the woman said. I followed her into a tidy apartment. "To the kitchen," she commanded. I obeyed. "So, you don't know what happened here a year ago?" she asked suddenly, pouring me a cup of tea. Tatiana Mikhailovna told me a little. The old woman narrowed her eyes and twisted her lips. "Did she tell you that the daughter wasn't her neighbor's husband's, but her own husband's? That she was Vidya's daughter?" We all knew. Tatiana acted like she didn't see the resemblance, or how Vidya used to run over to his neighbors whenever her husband was away on business trips. Vidya would even skip work to visit his mistress. He was a real dog. And when her husband died, that Tanya, that bitch, she was the one slipping her vodka. It's her sin, her fault that the girl killed herself. The girl asked for help, she couldn't pay back the money her mother had borrowed. But Tanya just shoved her out the door while she was crying and pushed her down the stairs. Then she and her husband left for vacation. I nearly choked on my tea. Uncle Vidya had a daughter? I'm sorry, but where was the girl's mother during all this? The old woman suddenly sighed, and I saw tears welling up in the corners of her eyes. Nobody knows. They found her a month after they found her daughter. Drank herself to death, probably. She was a good woman, even if she was a bit loose. Loved her cats, and she adored her daughter. Her husband, though, he used to beat her when he was alive. He knew she was cheating on him. I felt sorry for her. After he died, even though he was cruel to her, he never laid a finger on the girl. He didn't divorce her either. I always looked out for the girl. Oh, it was so hard for her, being a teenager with an alcoholic mother. She was a straight-A student, got into college all on her own. She did everything herself. And then she just broke. Such a beautiful girl she was. Did you happen to hear anything strange in the hallway last night? Noises, scraping sounds? No, young man. The woman sighed again, and I saw her shoulders slump, her head drop. I sleep with earplugs. I left her apartment with a heavy head and troubled thoughts. I sent a text to Elisa, confirming I would be at the university at 10 that evening. She was supposed to be there too. In the meantime, I made another attempt to talk to my neighbors on the first floor, but there was really no one to talk to. The old woman was senile, and her son was deaf, mute, and also drunk. Only their neighbor, the alcoholic Uncle Leosha, as he called himself, admitted that he suspected our neighbor had been murdered, possibly by Uncle Vidya or Tatiana herself. Uncle Leosha had drunk with her more than once, and she had complained about threats from Tatiana, who, despite smiling to her face, hated her for sleeping with her husband. My opinion of Uncle Vidya and Tatiana Mikhailovna changed drastically in a single day. I started to recall Tatiana's overly solicitous, cloying voice and Uncle Vidya's cheerful, energetic communication style. What did I really know about them, other than that they had taken care of me and welcomed me into their family? And my mom, when was the last time she had actually seen Tatiana Mikhailovna? 15 years ago? After that, it was just occasional letters and Skype calls for the last couple of years. I went back up to my apartment and got lost in thought. I called my mother and asked what she knew about her friend. Mom hesitated. Sasha, I should have told you a long time ago. You've met Uncle Vidya now. What do you think of him? He seems like a decent guy, but the neighbors have nothing good to say about them. I wanted you two to become friends. That's why I stayed in touch with Tanya. You see, he's your father. Does he know? I jumped up in shock. My mother had raised me without a father. According to her, it just hadn't worked out between them since their student days. I had never pushed for details. Suddenly, the pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. He knows, Sasha. And Tanya knows too. I was dating him, and I got pregnant. Behind my back, he started an affair with Tanya. I went back to my parents to have you, and they got married. It was so painful, but the resentment faded after you were born. He always sent money for you. Now he wants to bring you into his business. Things didn't work out for him and Tanya. God never gave them children. After the conversation with my mom, I sat in a state of shock for a long time. Not only had I just found my father, but I also learned I had a half-sister. I wondered what she looked like, what she was like. I decided to try to get into the locked apartment, but I couldn't do it today. I still had my meeting with Elisa. I arrived at the university for my courses, but Elisa wasn't there yet. I anxiously checked my phone, but there were no messages. When my class ended, I rushed out into the hallway. It was empty. I waited for her outside her classroom. She finally appeared at 10:30 p.m. Was it my imagination, or had she been crying? Elisa, what happened? Sasha, her voice was filled with sorrow, and it sounded like she was about to burst into tears. Sasha, my mom, she's sick again. I don't know how to help her. She broke down sobbing. What about your father? He died a few years ago. She's not doing well on her own. Elisa, think about yourself, I said, trying to hug her. I pulled her close, and she cried on my shoulder in the dark, nearly empty corridors of the university. We could hear distant voices and footsteps, but in our hallway, we were completely alone. Sasha, I'm being threatened. My mom borrowed money, and she can't pay it back. I don't know where to get it. They're threatening to take our apartment. Elisa, come to my place. I can't take the metro. I'm scared everyone will stare at me, she said through her tears. Okay, let's get a car then. With my arm around her shoulder, I walked her toward the metro station, trying to hail a cab. Back at my apartment, I put the crying girl to bed. She lay with her face buried in the pillow, sobbing bitterly and inconsolably, like a small child. I sat beside her, stroking her hair. She seemed so small and defenseless. I wanted to protect her and comfort her. When she finally fell asleep, I lay down next to her, held her, and drifted off myself. When I woke up in the morning, she was gone. A note was on the kitchen table. Thank you, Sasha. I'll call. We'll definitely see each other again. I looked in the fridge, wanting to eat. The leftover cutlets from Tatiana Mikhailovna and the soup from the day before were in the trash can. Elisa, I thought. Well, okay. I made myself some scrambled eggs and thought. I had another free day. I was going to break into that apartment. It was unlikely anyone would react to the noise in the building, especially since the neighbors were expecting migrant workers to move in any day now. An hour later, after buying the necessary tools, I went up to the 4th floor of my building. Here goes nothing. It took me half an hour to pick the lock. Stepping inside, I was surprised by what I saw. The furniture was untouched. It looked as if someone was living there and had just stepped out, though there were no personal belongings. The bathroom was white and clean, as if nothing had ever happened there. And there was absolutely no dust in the apartment. What the hell? I walked into the room directly above mine. The bed was there, empty. Nothing could have fallen here. Nothing at all. For some reason, a crazy idea popped into my head. To spend the night here and finally figure out what was going on. I walked through the apartment. My footsteps echoed loudly. What's this? My eyes were drawn to a chest under the kitchen table, which I hadn't noticed at first. It was locked. I had to break it open. What I found inside made me shudder. 2 urns with ashes and 2 death certificates. One for Daria Sergeevna Paramonova, 45 years old. The second, presumably her daughter's. There was also a photo album. Before I could read the second death certificate or open the album, my cell phone rang, and I grabbed it. "How are you feeling?" It was Tatiana Mikhailovna's voice. "Not good," I said suddenly. "I feel really sick." "Sasha, honey, let me come over. I'll bring you something to eat. Vidya will be expecting you at work next week." I told him I'd take care of you. "Okay, Tatiana Mikhailovna, when will you be here?" "Closer to the evening, Sasha." "Tatiana Mikhailovna," I asked unexpectedly, "who owns the Paramonov's apartment now?" Her voice suddenly became hard. "That girl who died, she was his daughter. We did a DNA test after her death. He's the sole heir." "Okay, Tatiana Mikhailovna, that's your business. Sure, come over. I'll be waiting." For some reason, I didn't want to be alone with her. Something about her was making me very uneasy. The metallic edge in her voice I'd never heard before, her insistence on taking care of me. I took the album with me, hoping to look at it later, and went back down to my place, carefully closing the door to the other apartment behind me. Back home, I started to feel nauseous again. I lay down and fell asleep. There was too much new information, too much to figure out, and I just didn't have the energy for it right now. Waking up in the evening with a heavy head, I texted Elisa and invited her to come over. I got a short, "K. Be there at 11 inches" in reply. I called Tatiana Mikhailovna. Her visit was delayed. I decided to go meet Elisa. As I approached the metro station, I saw a thin girl trying to help up a fallen woman. The woman was drunk, mumbling, and covered in filth. I recognized her as the beggar I had given my change to a few days ago. "Sasha, help. Please, help me get her up." Elisa was on the verge of tears. "Sasha, this is my mom." I rushed to help her. I didn't ask any questions. I just supported the drunken woman and, with Elisa, managed to get her to my building, up to my apartment. I opened the door and saw Tatiana Mikhailovna standing in the hallway with a pot of soup. What happened next defied all logic. Seeing me with 2 women, Tatiana Mikhailovna shrieked and dropped the pot. Soup splattered across the floor. Stumbling backward as if trying to flee, her face a mask of terror, Tatiana Mikhailovna slipped on her high heels and fell, her head hitting the corner of the massive sideboard. Her arms flailed absurdly. There was a sickening crack as her head broke open. I rushed towards her, letting go of the drunken woman, yelling, "Elisa, help." But when I turned around, the doorway was empty. Tatiana Mikhailovna lay in a puddle of soup and blood, which was pouring from the back of her head. She was already dead. Later, after the police and ambulance arrived, called by the terrified old woman from the 2nd floor who hadn't yet gone to sleep or put in her earplugs and whose hair seemed to have turned even whiter from my screams that echoed through the damned building. And after the interrogations and tests they ran on me to rule out alcohol or drugs because of my strange state, they found poison in my system. The same poison was found in the cutlets in my trash can and in the soup spilled by the caring Tatiana Mikhailovna. After several days of complete shock, for both me and Uncle Vidya, who learned that his wife was, willingly or unwillingly, involved in his daughter's suicide as well as the attempts to poison me, I finally understood whose eyes Elisa's had so vaguely reminded me of. The eyes of a lost and miserable Uncle Vidya on the day he learned of his beloved wife's death. Oh, and his daughter's name was indeed Elisa. In that very photo album I had taken from the Paramonov's apartment, a few days after Tatiana Mikhailovna's death, I found a photograph of that same tall, gentle blonde in tight jeans.